taking the idea, oh, I'm gonna do a podcast. What was the first, second, and third steps of literally laying it down, getting the website, like getting this thing together?
Yeah, so my first thing, and it was recommended to me. I reached out to this guy in St. Louis that had a podcast and a web show. And I reached out to him because I'm a firm believer that, success leaves clues, and I don't try to reinvent the wheel myself when smarter people have gone along before me and figured some of that stuff out. So the first thing that I was encouraged to do was really figure out, like, what is my objective with a podcast? Because if you don't figure out your objective, you're really just, it's kind of like a hobby, right? And we're all busy entrepreneurs and founders, and we've got better things to do with our time than hobbies that suck up our time. So I was encouraged early on to really get focused around how I could leverage a podcast as a tool to drive my message, to create value for my business, and as a business coach, where I'm selling higher value coaching services to companies and small business owners, I wanted to make sure that there was an element of my podcast that was not only giving people value, but also indirectly, in my case, creating revenue, so that it was funneling people my way, so that I was building this kind of reputation as somebody who knew what the hell they were talking about, right? And so very early on, I started viewing my podcast as a tool, and the biggest thing that it allowed me to do is not get distracted with too many other things. Because as an early stage entrepreneur, there's all the shiny objects. I could podcast, I could blog, I could speak, I could write a book, I could do, you name it, right? And so knowing that I wanted to strategically use my podcast in a way that was valuable to my business allowed me to stay focused on that experiment. In other words, I wasn't doing a bunch of other stuff. I was building a business and talking to potential clients, and I was podcasting, and that was pretty much it for that first year.
Right. And how did you determine that was the one thing to focus on?
Well, because this is kind of a really bad answer, but it was the thing I was furthest along with, and I was having fun with it, honestly. Okay. I thought to myself, and I still think to myself, how cool is it that I have this tool called a podcast that gives me a great excuse to reach out to someone else versus, a cold email or, trying to pick up the phone and get somebody's attention, right? It's a very captive thing. Like, I'm reaching out to someone with a purpose to interview them, to talk business strategy, to highlight them with my audience, and at the same time, get me exposed to their audience, because that's something that I get to do with a podcast, is ask that everybody that I interview shares the content on their platforms, on social media, with their email list and their newsletter, whatever. And so it got me a lot of exposure that I would not have otherwise gotten early on.